Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
Fine.
So, did you give your exam?
Yes, ma'am. It's completed. It's gone well.
Would you say?
Ma'am, it's means the exam was easy.
Good, good, good. I'm happy. I'm proud of you. Okay, just we'll wait for in case somebody else wants to join, and then if you want, we will start a new chapter today.
Okay.
We will do development. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah, you're fine with it, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. We did a constitutional design last time, and we let us do just a minute. Okay, I'll let's wait for others to join. Then in the meantime, let me pick out a chapter. Okay, okay. So you are class ninth. We let us do democratic rights.
And can we do history?
History you want? Okay,
Yes.
we can do history. Let's do French Revolution. You want to do French Revolution? I think we
Actually,
have done French.
yes.
Okay, let's do French Revolution. Okay, fine. You see my screen, right? Okay, so whenever we talk about as soon as the chapter starts, the important date that comes in your chapter is 14th July 1789. Okay, now on this day, on the morning of 14th July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. The king had commanded troops to move into the city. Rumors spread that he would soon order the army to open fire upon the citizens. So this was a rumor. Okay, it was not the reality. Some 7,000 men and women gathered in front of the town hall and decided to form a people's militia. Militia means a military force, an army. They broke into a number of government buildings in search for arms. Okay, they looted the police stations, you can say, and they picked out the weapon and they thought the king's troops are going to attack us. So we should save ourselves. And how do we save ourselves? We should attack back. Okay, now a group of several hundreds people marched towards the eastern part of the city and stormed the fortress prison, the Bastille. Okay, so on 14th of what happened on 14th July 1789? Okay, several hundreds of people, they attacked the fortress prison. They attacked on the Bastille. It was a castle type place, a palace
And
where they
actually,
lived.
it was a prison, right?
It was a prison, and they thought there are prisoners over there, and they are going to free them. Okay, so where they hope to find hoarded ammunition, they wanted to protect themselves, and they wanted weapons and ammunition. So in the armed fight that followed, the commander of the Bastille was killed, and the prisoners were released. Though there were only seven of them, or only seven prisoners were there. Okay, now after this, yet the Bastille was hated by all because it stood for the despotic power of the king. They hated this place. Why? Because they thought that this is where the king is holding our people among us as prisoners. The fortress was demolished and its fragments were sold in the market to all those who wished to keep a souvenir of its destruction. So, can you imagine how hostile this was? That they wanted to keep a souvenir. They wanted to they kept a memory of this destruction of the fortress of Bastille. The days that followed saw more rioting both in Paris and the countryside. Most people were protesting against the high price of bread. So this was another problem the people were forcing. There was high price of bread. Food was getting expensive. People were not able to feed their children well. Okay, now when historians look back upon this time, they saw it as the beginning of a chain of events that ultimately led to the execution of the king of France. So it started by the attack on Bastille, okay, and then it led to small riots because they were hungry, and a series of small events went, and this eventually led to the French Revolution. Okay, a chain
Okay.
of events went by. Okay, that ultimately led to the execution of the king. They executed the king. They guillotined him. Okay, though most people at the time did not anticipate this outcome. How and why did this happen? So, how this happened? We are going to study in detail about this. So, here you see we have a figure where we see the society of that was during the monarch, that is during the king of that was Louis 16. So there was the first estate that, and then these were the clergy or the nobles, oh sorry, the churchmen, you can say. Second stage, that was the nobility, those who were born into kings and queens and prince and princess. Okay, so these were they inherited everything by birth. Okay, now came the third state that contained the rest of the society. Okay, and these were also contained the small peasants who did not have any land. They were peasants and artisans. Also, when the print culture was established, a new group emerged. They were the businessmen. They were young men who worked hard and they established a business for themselves. Okay, and they were also, because of print culture, when print culture started, they began to educate themselves. So now they were courts and lawyers also from the smaller class people, right? So in 1774, Louis XVI of the Bourbon family of kings ascended the throne of France. He was only 20 years old, okay, and married to the Austrian princess Marie Antoinette. Okay, upon his accession, the new king found an empty treasury. Why was the treasury empty? Because the kings before him was very busy acquiring the nearby territory. They want for them instead of making development, they wanted to acquire more and more land. And of course, when there is a war, there are expenses. So this led to empty treasury. Long years of war had drained the financial resources of France. Added to this was the cost of maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versatile. The palace of Versatile had an immense expenses. They had grand parties every day. Okay, they had grand lunch and dinners. Okay, and now under Louis XVI, France, they had to maintain their luxury. They could not bring those expenses down. They did not cut those costs. But what they thought, what solution he took out for his empty treasury, he decided to raise the taxes, and these taxes were to be taken from the third estate. These were the taxpayers, and these two were the tax takers. Okay, they were taking the tax, and these three, the third estate, were the taxpayers. Okay, now France helped 13 American colonies to gain their independence from the common enemy, Britain. The war added more than a billion livres. Livres is a currency like ours is a rupee. There was a currency that was livres to a debt and had already risen to more than 2 billion livres. Okay. Now, lenders who gave the state credit now began to charge 10% interest on loans. Okay. So, any loan, if you're not having an earning, how are you going to pay your interest? So what happens? Interest leads to compound interest. Okay, now there is an interest on the interest. Okay, so this is you can say this is what in even to a common man this leads to a debt trap. This is called the debt trap. So even King Louis found himself into he fell into a debt trap. Okay, so the French government was obliged to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payments alone. To meet its regular expenses, such as the cost of maintaining an army, the court. So, what was the cost? They had to maintain an where is my yeah maintain an army. They had to maintain a court, running government offices, universities. The state was forced to increase taxes. So now they had to pay interest, they had to pay back their loan, and also they had a luxurious life. So they had to, he thought the only way out was to increase taxes. Okay, now yet even this measure would not have sufficed. French society in the 18th century was divided into three states, and only members of the third state paid taxes. Okay, the society of states was part of the feudal system that dated back to the Middle Ages. So this was the feudal system. Okay, that the only one person, only the poor are going to be paying taxes. Okay, and the rich, or you can say the clergy and the nobility, they were the one who enjoyed all the luxuries. The term old regime is usually used to describe the society and institutions of France before 1789. Figure 2 shows how the system of states in French society was organized. Peasants made up to 90% of the population. So 90% of the population were poor and they were the taxpayers. However, only a small number of them owned land they cultivated. About 60% of the land was owned by the nobles. Okay, and done by the nobles, church, and other richer members of the third estate. The members of the first two estates, that is the clergy and the nobility, enjoyed certain privileges by birth. The most important of these was exemption from paying taxes to the state. So they did not have any taxes to pay. The most important of these was exemption from, okay, the nobles further enjoyed feudal privileges. These included feudal dues, which they extracted from the peasants. Okay, they extracted money from, you can say, you couldn't say money, they took their grains, the produce that they harvested, they took their grains and they made them work for them free. So this was all taken by the peasants. The peasants were obliged to render services to the lord. Render services to the lord, okay, means to work for them for free, to work in their houses and fields, to serve in the army, and to participate in building roads. So they did all this labor for free. This was called the feudal privileges. Okay, the church too extracted shares, share of taxes called titis. This may come in fill in the blanks, or this may come. What is the church extracted the share of taxes were called titis from the peasants, and finally all members of the third estate had to pay taxes to the state. These include a direct tax called tile, okay, and a number of indirect taxes which were levied on articles of everyday consumption like salt or tobacco. Means the peasants, when they consumed salt, when they consumed tobacco, they had to pay this tax. Okay, the burden of financing activities of the state through taxes was borne by the third estate alone, and all these taxes only the third estate paid.
Ma'am, ma'am, did the nobility also took the taxes from the third estate?
The clergy and the nobles. The clergy were the churchmen, okay, the pope of the church, that is, and the nobles. Nobles were the kings and princes, and all the rich people, you can say. They were the one who took taxes. They didn't have to pay any tax, and also they took free labor from the
Ma'am,
peasants.
no, ma'am, I was asking like, in this paragraph it's shown like the church extracted taxes, but the nobility also, did the nobility extract taxes from the peasants?
Yes, even they took taxes. Their taxes were called teeth, okay, and even they took taxes. Yes. Okay, teeth was a tax levied by the church. Okay, and tally was a tax paid directly to the state. I mean, this was gone, you can say, in the indirect to the king. Okay, and this was going to the church. So they had to pay two types of taxes. You get it?
Yes.
Okay, let's move on further. Okay, now here this picture question might come. So this is a man. Okay, he is a noble man. Okay, now he is enjoying all of the rich, and the poor peasant, he is paying also in money, paying with fruits. Okay, now he is also paying in grains. He is also, and this guy is enjoying all the luxury. He has a luxurious dog also. He has, okay. So this poor fellow brings everything, grains, fruits, money, salad. The fat lord sits here ready to accept it all. He does not even care to grace him with a look. He is not even looking at him, that this guy is giving me so much of things. Okay, now the struggle to survive. How everything happened in the, when you talk, when we come to here, we'll have to you will have to understand there might be a question of subsistence crisis. What is a subsistence crisis? An extreme situation, uh, sorry, an extreme situation where the basic means of livelihood are endangered. Okay, so means a person is not able to eat food. When you have, when you can say when a person is hungry, so he's just going to look for food. So he is not going to understand this is good and this is bad and this is evil and this is good deed and bad deed. He just wants food, right? So this was what happened to the French society. The population of France rose from about 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. The population grew. Naturally, there are more mouths to feed. This led to rapid increase in the in the demand for food grains. So demand for food grains had risen. Production of grains could not keep pace with the demand. So the price of bread was, which was the staple diet. I mean, people ate bread. Everybody eats bread in their daily diet. So this the price of bread rose up. So most workers were employed as laborers in workshops whose owners fixed their wages. They had fixed wages. Okay, so the earning was fixed and the price of food was rising. But wages did not keep pace with the rise in prices, so the gap between the poor and the rich widened. Okay, this things became worse when drought or hail reduced the harvest. So to add up onto their bad luck, you can say there was a bad harvest. Okay, or you can say hail. Hail was the bad weather. Okay, now this led to subsistence crisis, something that occurred frequently in France during the old regime. This used to often happen in I can say about a period of years. It used to keep on happening. So people were fed up of this. So this is their bad harvest. These are the points here. There was a bad harvest. Then there was you can say more the poor can no longer buy bread. There was price of rice, and then there was epidemics was also there. Diseases were there. So all this led to a subsistence crisis. Growing middle class envisaged and underprivileges. In the past, peasants and workers had participated in revolts against increasing tax and food scarcity, but they lacked the means and programs to carry out full-scale measures. So they were kind of uneducated. They revolted, but they did not know how to anything if you how to organize it. So if what was the way out if they should not if they had to if they stood up to speak, so they had nothing to speak about it. They did not know how to approach themselves, you can say. So they lacked the means and the program. They did not know how to carry out their measures. So for this, what happened? The educated people came in. The educated middle class rose up. Okay, so in this was left to those groups within the third estate who had become prosperous and had access to education and new ideas. So when people began to educate, so among these third estates rose up the educated people and the progressive who made some money out of business. The 18th century witnessed the emergence of social group termed the middle class. Till now, we had the rich and the poor. There was no middle class. So when did the middle class came? When the print culture started, when people began to educate themselves and they began to progress. Okay, who earned their wealth through an expanding overseas trade and from the manufacture of goods such as woolen, silk textiles that were either exported or bought by the richer members of the society. In addition to merchants and manufacturers, the third estate included professionals such as lawyers or administrative officials. All of these were educated and they believed that no group in society should be privileged by birth. So now with this a new idea came up, that was the liberal idea. Okay, rather a person's social position must depend on his merit. When he should deserve what is enjoying. These ideas envisage envisaging a society based on freedom and equal laws. They begin to talk about freedom and equality in laws. Means everybody should be equal in the face of law. Till now, it was not so. And opportunities for all. Everybody should have equal opportunities. Or were put forward by philosophers such as John Locke, John Jacques Rousseau, and in this two treatises of government, Locke sought to refute the doctrine on the divine and absolute right. Okay, anyway, of the monarch, Rousseau carried the idea forward, proposing a form of government based on social contract between people and their representatives. So it was Rousseau, okay, who started that there should be a government that should be led by that should represent the people. So this idea was very new, but it was so pleasing to everybody who was already very much harassed by the clergy and the nobles. Fine. In the spirit of the laws, Montesquieu proposed a division of power within the government between the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. So he the division of power should be where among the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. These one person should not have all the powers. It should be divided into these three divisions. This model of government was put into force in the USA. After the 13th colonies declared their independence from Britain. The American Constitution and its guaranteed of individual rights was an important example for political thinkers in France. So Americans had adopted these idea of Rousseau in their constitution when they became free from Britain. The idea of these philosophers were discussed intensively in saloons and coffee houses and spread among people through books and newspapers. Okay, these were frequently read aloud in groups for the benefit of those who could not read and write. The news that Louis XVI planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expenses of the state generated anger and protest against the system of privileges. Now, Louis XVI was thinking of imposing taxes now, but the middle class was spreading the ideas, the philosophers were spreading the idea of equality and justice, and that the power should be taken, all the power should not be given to the monarch, there should be a division of powers. So now because of this the people began to protest. So now comes the outbreak of the revolution. We are going to talk about the outbreak of the revolution. In the side, you have some important dates. Okay, and you can just go through this. We'll just read it here. Louis XVI had to increase taxes for reasons you have learned in the previous section. How do you think? Forget this. On 5th May 1789, Louis XVI called together an assembly of the states general to pass the proposal for. So this was an important date. That was 5th of May 1789. Now he called an assembly. Okay, now there were three states were there. Now, what was this injustice way of voting was there? Although, let's read about it, then you will understand. Okay, so called together Assembly of States General to pass proposal for new taxes. Resplendent hall in Versailles was prepared to host the delegates. The first and second states sent 300 representatives each. Okay, the first and second state, that was the rich and the church. There's the nobles and the church, who were seated in rows facing each other on two sides. So they were on each side, okay. While the 600 members of the third state had to stand. So the 300 were giving more respect, okay. They were made to sit, while the 600 members of the third state were made to stand at the back. The third state was represented by its more prosperous and educated members. So there, the educated and the prosperous were went, and with them, however, their grievance and demands were listed in some 40,000 letters which the representatives had brought with themselves. So they bought their some letters of the other people who were not allowed to come inside. Voting in the state general in the past had conducted according to the principle that each state had one vote. So there were three states, like I told you. Okay, one, two, and this was the third. So these two were nobles. They were given one vote, and one vote. Of course, they were all together. These two were together, so they will always win the majority. You understand how it was played, how the game was played at that time. So this time too, Louis XVI was determined to continue the same practice, but members of the third state demanded that voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. Means they had 300, they were together 300, okay, and they were 600. So they demanded that every person should be allowed to vote, one person, one vote. So then only it would be a fair election. But Louis XVI refused. Okay, okay. But members of the third state demanded that you should. This is an important sentence, that voting now be conducted by the assembly as a whole, where each member would have one vote. This was one of the democratic principles, okay, put forward by the philosophers like Rousseau in his book The Social Contract. So this was the first time that somebody had proposed a election for the people. When the king rejected this proposal, members of the third state walked out of the assembly in protest. Okay, when they walked out, they did not just go back home. Okay, they themselves collected and they held a meeting among themselves. The representatives of the third state viewed themselves as spokesmen for the whole French nation. On 30th June, they assembled in the hall of an outdoor tennis court in the ground of Versailles. Okay, they assembled in an indoor tennis court. Okay, they declared themselves a national assembly. Okay, and swore not to disperse till they had drafted a constitution. Now, first time a constitution was drafted here, constitution for France, that would limit the powers of the monarch. Okay, they wanted to limit the powers of the monarch, and their power should be divided into three. That was the legislative, the executive, and the judiciary. They were led by Mirabeau, Abbe Cies. Okay, now Mirabeau was born in a noble family, but was convinced by the need to do away with the society of feudal privilege. He brought out a journal and delivered powerful speeches to the crowds assembled in Versailles. Abbé Cies, originally a priest, wrote an influential pamphlet called "What is the Third Estate?" Okay, so there were even people who were conscious, who had conscious soul, even in the nobles, and also those who were born in a, you can say, noble families. So while the National Assembly was busy in versatile drafting a constitution, the rest of the France seized with turmoil. They were facing subsistence crisis. A severe winter had meant a bad harvest. The price of bread rose. Often bakers exploited the situation and hoarded supplies. After spending hours in long queues at the bakery, crowds of angry women stormed into the shop. At the time, the king ordered troops to move into Paris. On 14th July, the agitated crowd stormed and destroyed the Bastille. Okay, this is what we studied in the starting of the chapter. In the countryside, rumors spread from village to village that the lords of the manor had hired bands of brigades who were on their way to destroy the ripe crops. So they wanted to, they got the rumor spread that their harvest, the food that they were waiting to eat, that is also going to be spoiled by the armies of the king. Why? Because they wanted to suppress the revolt. So they became hostile. Fine. Caught in a frenzy of fear, peasants in several districts seized hoes and pitchforks. You can say hoes and pitchforks are those tools that is used in farming, and attacked the statues. They looted hoarded grains and burned down documents containing records of manorial dues. Okay, you're going to say like
Ma'am, loans.
yeah, the loans were recorded in papers and all that.
Yes.
So that was all burned because they were fed up of all the harassment. A large number of nobles fled from their homes, many of them migrating to neighboring countries. So, so now you understand there was a sequence of small incidents, and that ultimately led to the French Revolution. Now, faced with the powers of his revolting subjects, Louis XVI finally recorded recognition of the National Assembly. Now he was pressurized and he accepted. Okay, okay, fine. I recognize the National Assembly and do one thing. I am going to held an election once more and accepted the principle that his power would from now on be checked by a constitution. Okay, now on the night of 4th of August 1789, the assembly passed a decree abolishing the feudal system of obligations and taxes. Members of the clergy too were forced to give up their privileges. Now privileges were taken away. Teats were that is the taxes were abolished and lands owned by the churches were confiscated, means they were taken away by the people. As a result, the government acquired assets worth at least 2 billion livres. Uh,
Actually, can you continue in next class?
yeah, we have done with this chapter. Next class, we will study about France becomes a constitutional monarchy. Okay.
Okay.
You have any question?
No, ma'am.
Okay then. Okay then. We'll end our class now. Fine.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bye,
Arshit,
ma'am.
for
Thank
joining.
you.
Bye bye. Good night.